Welcome, everybody, and thank you for attending the panel. This is about Generation ESG, developing the blueprint for sustainable business growth. Now, just to give you a backdrop of why we're taking this topic, I'm sure sustainability, ESG, has been the topic that you've been listening to. We're starting to take a bit of a slightly different take on it. And the reason for that is that there's a widening expectation gap that we can see between the longer term and wider societal expectation, and marrying that to what has been traditionally a very narrow focus on traditional financial returns, right? And that gap is only widening. But what's good to see, and there's enough survey that's been done, that there is a lot of organizations and CXOs who are now getting really active on the sustainability agenda, because the negative ramifications of that is actually quite evident in your business stability, continuity, and reputation overall, right? However, that said, the challenge we'll try and discover this panel today is there alternate and newer business models that have to come in that actually do provide for the resilience and the value creation that stakeholders and traditional businesses require, but give you a huge optionality to build on that agenda of sustainability in a very different light and in a different fashion, right? Now, corporate venturing is one way of injecting that new way of thinking, breakthrough ideas into a corporate setting. And that's what we will explore today. With that, I'm extremely delighted and excited that we pulled together a real great panelists. Thank you for joining. So we start with Marisa Drew, Chief Sustainability Officer, Standard Chartered Bank; Alex Manson, Head SC Ventures, you just heard him. And we've got Ellen, Chief Sustainability Officer for MasterCard, and David Wallstein from Tencent Holding. All right. With that, I'm probably going to start off with a question to all four of you, and this is purely a warm-up question, all right? Just so that you can get warmed up and look at how we're going to do this. Companies are increasingly addressing ESG challenges. CXOs are getting really active. But what is yet to be answered is sustainability really core to the business growth? And is that the way that business growth will happen in the future? Your views on that? And with that, I'd like you to take a minute and just explain what your role is in your organization and what some of the focus and priority areas for you are in your organization. So starting with you, Max.
Okay, well, as Chief Sustainability Officer, the inaugural Chief Sustainability Officer for Standard Chartered, I view my role as incorporating sustainability strategy into the core operations of our bank. And there's an element of that is internal, our own operations. So it is the environmental footprint, it is the social activities and work that we're doing in our communities. But there's also the revenue proposition, so that's the external. How are we serving our clients on their sustainability journeys? As a bank, that's through the provision of capital principally, and through advice. And those two things are core to banking, but in my world, it's wrapping that sustainability lens around that. But getting to your question, and then I say, in some respects, I say the North Star of our group is mobilizing capital at scale to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. And in a way, that answers your question about, is it core to the strategy? Because if that is our raison d'etre, particularly in our markets, the developing markets, we have a breadth of 59 footprint markets, mostly in the developing world, what we're saying is these challenges are those of society. And if we're not doing something to play a part, we'll lose our license to operate. So this is indeed core and fundamental to our business. And also what we're realizing as we sit here today in Davos with all these topics, as we sit here every single day and pick up the paper and see the next catastrophic weather event, the business models of the past aren't working. Mm-hmm. If we don't rethink how to operate, the world's telling us we need to do something differently. If we don't change it up and think differently, we're actually ensuring our own demise. So I think this is necessity, and necessity also breeds a call to action. So I think when we're sitting around the table strategizing about what is our role is to help tackle some of those problems. And we can do that, and it's going to be through little things, the little I innovations. It's that kind of tweaks to our business model process work, but it's also the big I innovation. It is adopting and embracing new technologies, that are going to be the disruptors that are going to solve some of the problems that we're trying to face today.
Thank you. Alex?
So I've had the exorbitant privilege of 4 minutes of introduction. So
We know what you do.
You know what Ventures is. I won't get back to that. I would only just say that that 99% of what we do has an ESG component to it. If we think of ESG broadly, including obviously addressing inequality, sustainable growth, generally speaking, financial inclusion, then pretty much every one of our ventures is related to this, and we can only invest with that purpose. To your question, Jiten, I will just focus on the word growth. Some people question it, right? You know, growth may or may not be a good thing. It's wasteful. Does the world really need growth when we're about to hit a wall, etc.? I actually think we need growth, right? The welfare of human beings, especially in emerging markets, is predicated on growth. We need to facilitate growth. We need to enable it, and banks have a huge role to play in that. Which point to your question, is ESG versus growth? Well, it's a tautology. It's one and the same. Because if you think of growth with ESG as an operating constraint, then you're forever solving that contradiction and trade-off. ESG is an integral part of growth. There's no other thing than sustainable growth for us to achieve what I was describing earlier. But it's absolutely a mindset shift where we move from I won't break the law. It's an operating constraint. It's I'd like to do this, but being a little careful about that, and actually bringing it at the core and having a business model that has ESG at the core, which is very different.
So hi everybody. Yeah, I'm Ellen Jakowski, the Chief Sustainability Officer at MasterCard. And to the question about is ESG, should it be in the business model? Is it tied to the future of your company or organization? I live in Capitola, California. Most people have not heard of Capitola, California until very, very recently, when that pier, the image of the pier breaking in half, kind of went around the world. That's a block and a half from my house. Also, the wildfires that we're experiencing in that region as well are extreme. Lots of issues that are being felt daily by me and my neighbors, and that's in one tiny place in the world. So wherever you live today, you are feeling both the risk of climate change as well as the opportunity that it is bringing in terms of how we as companies and organizations get ahead of this. How do we stop what's happening, what we've created, and then how do we pivot so that we can look at this both from a risk mitigation activity as well as an opportunity. So if it's not part of your business model, any survey of customers today at whatever level, whether it's the individual consumer or a corporate partner and customer of yours, an enterprise, they are now all asking questions about sustainability. So if you're not listening to the market shift that is happening, you are woefully behind.
Thank you.
I'm actually from down the street. And that's the example I'm going to be using all week, how California has gone from wildfire risk and extreme drought, now to these catastrophic floods, which actually were forecasted by a few climate scientists, and it sounded really crazy 3 or 4 months ago when they did an article in the New York Times saying California had that risk, and the planet changes so fast that you think an article like that comes out and they're warning you about something that's going to happen 10 or 20 years into the future, and it's actually just around the corner. So that's the kind of accelerating change that we're seeing on the planet. So my name is David Wallerstein. I work with Tencent. I've been with Tencent for 23 years, since it was a 45-person company in China. And I'm called the Chief Exploration Officer. So what that means is I've been using that title for about 8 years to try to describe my work. On one hand, I only think about existential global challenges to humanity, and everything we're talking about here is related to that. And on the other hand, though, I'm very specialized. I only do breakthrough technologies, so something new, maybe electric aviation I've been spending a lot of time on lately, or artificial intelligence applied to various aspects of human health, like cancer treatments and things like that. So I'm really thinking more about the challenges and what needs to be solved, and prioritization. Probably that's like 60% of my time, and then 40% is investing in companies. My function is very externally driven. We're investing in companies outside of China that aren't Tencent. We have projects inside Tencent, but most of my time is with portfolio companies outside, and we're trying to just see that they have a strategy that can address that challenge. On the question of growth, if I may. So Okay, I think as we enter into a very dynamic state with our climate crisis on Earth, first thing is it's very serious. It's very real. And I think a lot of our tools and measurements that we use, like GDP growth and all that stuff, of course it's valuable, but I think it may lose its value over time. And I feel like what's really important to focus on is quality of life metrics for everyone on Earth, because you can play with GDP numbers based on like human population growth, which may be very risky in certain parts of the world. And if you want growth, you might actually encourage, you know, your country may have a lot of challenges, but you may actually encourage more and more population growth, which has its responsibilities and challenges. I think when you look at lifestyle, quality of life metrics, you're thinking, how do I make sure everyone gets 1,500 calories a day, enough protein, enough energy, enough heat, enough water, and it may not be that they need 2,200 calories a day, and we all know this from experience. Sometimes you have to cut back on your diet, and like actually a room that is too hot isn't good for your health, and there's many things where it's just like you don't need to be excessive. So the framework, in my view, globally needs to move towards how do we make sure that everyone has what they need to survive and be comfortable. That's also kind of another take on the inequality question that you always get. I think growth gets us in trouble sometimes. This may not be the answer that people were hoping for in the business world, but let's get the bare essentials, these necessities to everyone who needs it on Earth, and really focus on that, because climate will make that increasingly challenging.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting. One of the things that we've been reading, and I read this today morning actually, is that the entire organizations have now moved from defining a strategy for sustainability to defining sustainable business strategies. And I think there's a difference between them, but that's what we're articulating here, which is drive business strategies which are sustainable. But on that note, this is key, and you're saying that now it is part of the whole business. So question to the two sustainability officers here for MasterCard and for Standard Chartered Bank. How do you then balance the expectation, which is a short-term financial return value expectation that stakeholders have, as compared to the longer-term plans that you need to build around sustainability? And there's always this question around cost today for something tomorrow, where you've got short-term gains to make. How do you balance between the two?
Ellen, do you want to start, or do you want to?
I'm sure. So, important question, and I think it can follow a model very similar to any aspect of serious innovation. You mentioned you're focused on the electrification of the airline industry. You can't transition to this. You can't innovate this type of technology without investment, right? Without spending in the short term and building that capability. And any kind of innovation typically follows that model. If you need to invest up front to develop the solutions, to test them, to prove them, and then to start scaling them. And oftentimes those costs come in the short term and the payoff comes in the longer term. So the way that I think about it is like any other innovation opportunity, of making sure that you're balancing where you're investing and thinking through that business model shift of invest to grow in the long term.
And I violently agree, but I would also put it under the moniker of transition. So in any mature model, and if you're trying to migrate to something new, there has to be a period of adjustment. So none of this is a sharp overnight. Mm-hmm. And this is a battle that we constantly fight. We are subject to external parties who say things like, I want you to stop financing all high carbon emitting industries now. Well, that is actually what creates the profits to allow us to make those investments in the business model of the future. And by the way, if we weren't financing those mature industries, we'd have bigger problems. In the energy side, the world would be without heat and electricity and all the things that we need that give us our livelihoods today. So all of this is about a balance. None of this is black and white. But typically it is the revenue generation that you have in your traditional business that can fund that innovation investment. The other thing I think you have to do is, certainly in the climate equation, is back to that same principle that the business models that we have today fundamentally aren't working, otherwise we wouldn't be in the position that we're in. So if we keep doing the same old thing, we are actually ensuring that we're going to be out of business. So that model doesn't work either, so you can't ignore that investment cycle. And the final thing I would say is what I've told my teams, we're creating a series of innovation hubs for us to really get stuck in, because oftentimes innovation, especially in our field, very dynamic, fast moving, we don't know where it's going to land, but you have to give yourself the freedom to get stuck in to participate in that innovation. So what I say to our teams is, in a big way and in a more strategic way, You should spend 80% of your time on the core business that keeps the lights on, but then give yourself the freedom to spend, say, 20% on the innovation topics. And that way, there is a balance in terms of the day-to-day behaviors, because I also think you can get consumed in one or the other, and I think you need a little bit of both to make it work.
And just to follow question from that, in terms of KPIs that you set in the organization, are they different from the KPIs that you were setting earlier, which were very financially and returns driven, as compared to KPIs that you set now? Are they? The two of you, Ellen and Marisa.
Well,
David, if you want to go ahead.
yeah, so, well, I think I can answer that with what I was going to say earlier. Look, I think the lever that we have, every organization has, to both simultaneously drive sustainability, resilience in organizations, and actually make your business more profitable, is through efficiency and optimization. And efficiency is kind of like very raw, because you can just think like, this room's too warm, it should be 19 degrees, not 22 degrees. Every 1 degree that you make, that you reduce in a room is 7% of energy savings, so 3 degrees less is like 21%. So basically, there's so much waste, especially in the developed world, all around us. Energy, food waste throughout the value chain, from the farmer to the cafeteria at the company. If we just reduce waste and still actually get all the services that we want, but we're just not wasting, we're probably gonna get like a near-term bump of 15-20% like savings, and that's gonna immediately lead to the bottom line, because that's all like, that was cost, now it's profit. And I think this is so appreciated, under-discovered. And if there was like one message I'd like to leave everyone with, if you go back to your organization and say like, hey, like, where's all the waste in this company, and let's get rid of it next year, you're probably gonna get 15-20% savings in each area that you target, and that's gonna be millions and millions of dollars if you're at that scale, if not more.
And
Please,
to a
stop wasting.
KPI is your carbon emissions. I mean, that is a KPI we never measured before.
Yeah.
On your net zero journey, it does lead you to that place, because in our supply chain we're looking at that. In our environmental footprint, we're saying, how do we reduce our carbon emissions? So that's a proxy for a new KPI. But the other KPI that we never measured back in the good old days was your impact, your societal impact. So we, are now actually asking ourselves the questions, the things that we're doing, the things that we're financing. What are we actually delivering to our clients, but also the communities that our clients operate in? Those are measurements that we're holding ourselves now accountable to as well. One other thing I might just throw out there, which is stepping back at a more systemic level, an organization called the ETC did a study to try to say, is it theoretically possible for us to get to net zero? Just as a theoretical question. And a whole bunch of academics and scientists went away for a couple of years to do that study. And the conclusion that they came to is, yes, theoretically possible, otherwise we wouldn't all be sitting here trying to get it done. But a third of the solution has got to come from technological innovation, that investment we talked about.
Yeah.
A third to 40% needs to come from process improvement, the little tweaks. It's the turning down the lights and turning down the heat and looking for all those inefficiencies and where there's leaky pipes and all of that, and then redistribute that savings into places that need it. And the hardest third, and David, you alluded to it, is your own individual behaviors. The single hardest part. Are you going to stop doing something? And that's where you get into this question of the consumption generation that is sort of suggested that more is better all the time. But I find it really interesting. There's a whole new demographic out there now that's called Generation Less. And the idea is you buy fewer things of higher quality that last longer. And it's a provocative concept. I don't know if it's going to really take hold, and heaven forbid for the consumer companies, they'll probably not be very happy with that concept. But there's an interesting challenge to all of us to think about our own individual participation in the quest to get this done.
I'll just add back to the question about the KPI in the company and how do you really embed this into your full strategy. MasterCard did something quite leading back in April, where they changed the compensation model for all 25,000 plus employees, where all employees, every single person in the company is now compensated on whether or not MasterCard makes progress against its ESG goals, both environmental and social impact. So you take that from, just the CEO being compensated on a net zero goal, for example, or a diversity goal, the executive leadership team being compensated, to literally every employee. And then that begs the question, what is my job? What is my job inside the company? How am I contributing? If I sit as an individual contributor in marketing or procurement or design or fulfillment, whatever that is, what is my job? And now I'm going to be compensated on this. So this is important. This means we're all responsible. We're all on the sustainability team inside MasterCard. And I think that's a really important thing to think about as you're figuring out how you're going to integrate this across the company.
Thank you. David, I'm going to come to you because you and I did discuss this the last time we had met. So, as your role, you've been exploring and innovating and looking at new breakthrough technology ideas. But you're also very conscious, and you did voice out that there is a lot of challenges to adoption of that new technology, funding of that new technology. Do you want to just touch upon that? And then is corporate investment enough for that? Or do you think there should be more?
Well, so initially, I was doing a lot of venture investing at Tencent in 2007, and then I started targeting all my efforts towards these kind of like, global challenges area since about 2014. Originally, I thought there's a great idea, a great team, you fund it, and they're going to go run around and get deals. And then I started finding that there was really interesting solutions, but they weren't getting traction because sometimes they had to either, something was related to government. It was always permitting, or they had to get the right to install something across the city. And then I started meeting with governments to understand what's going on. Why is it so difficult to get a deal going? And I do feel time and time again, the technology is just available, but no one uses it. Often no one uses it. There's so many great technologies like energy efficiency technologies that just by implementing simple smart meters connected to the internet where customers can read and understand how much energy they're using, this needs support from a state-owned energy company. It may need policy support from the top level down. That may take 2 years. And just even with Europe's recent energy crisis, I wrote a number of articles about this. I tried to get certain things, like help certain things get moving. And of course, that's other people to do. But just seeing how difficult it was to drive simple things in the market, let alone big ideas. I really think I don't have the answer. Like governments, entrepreneurs, and financiers, they all need to work together. I do keep coming back to the importance of governments actually just wanting to really solve their challenge, like identifying it, wanting to solve it, communicating to the market that we are open. Here's the email address to send a mail to, here's the phone number to call. We're trying to solve our drought problem, our flood problem, our wildfire problem. We're open to solutions. We have some budget. Talk to Jenny, she's in charge of wildfire management. We need more of this coming from government to kind of act more like market driven. And I think that's where we're going to see the progress. But now it's like, who handles that? Do they care? It's a problem, and then the startups don't know where to go and nothing is happening fast enough. And that affects us to invest because the company shows they had a forecast of 10 million revenue and now it's 7 million. It's like, ooh, why did you fall short? Is it their fault or whose fault is it, right? So chicken or the egg problems.
So taking that question, and Alex, to you, you did a specific introduction around venture building. Given that we do need disruptive new business models, is venture building one or the only option available for us to really go out and be innovative and drive that innovation into organizations?
So I'll build on something you said, Marisa, and I think you guys alluded to, which is the point of business models and business setup. What you find when you're trying to evolve an organization, be it a bank or a corporate, any organization, is I have to demystify this. People aren't actually evil, refusing to change, and hoping secretly or openly that you will fail. People aren't like that. They actually want you to succeed. The reason why it's so hard to change an organization only from within is the setup. People aren't set up to do it. And it's all about the setup, the business model, the way you're conducting your business. If your business model is one of vertical pies where you sell things to certain people in a certain way via certain channels, then it's very hard to do that horizontal thing at the same time. Right? You're not set up for it. And hence the need to build business models that are different outside of the organization you're trying to transform. The conviction we started with is that if we were going to transform banking, we were going to have to do it within a bank as well as outside the bank, and do it in the same time. And the fact that we're doing it at the same time, but by the way, inside the bank is non-negotiable. It's the I you alluded to, the efficiency gains you're alluding to. It's non-negotiable. It's existential. So you have to do it. That's not enough because it does not address the business model and the setup. And so the combination of these two things is where the transformational power lies. And so yes, I think it's a way in the sense that you have to do this and that, but it's the only way to really be transformative, we think.
Thank you. David, you touched upon ecosystem coming together, and it's a very one point around entrepreneurs, technocrats, corporates, governments, as well as the capital providers, right? They all need to come together to build these kind of important business models. The question, Ellen, to you, partnerships have been really important as part of the job that you're doing in MasterCard, building partnerships, getting them to bear, bringing different strengths of different partners together in delivering those solutions. So just touch upon that and give us some examples of how has that been beneficial to the entire agenda of sustainability?
Sure. So an example that I used often at COP27 in Egypt was some of the work that MasterCard had been doing in the garment industry with factory owners. So about 80% of the workers in that industry are female, and typically, historically, they were paid in cash. They go home after work getting paid, and their husband says, please give me the money. Their father says, please give me your money, or the head of household. It's not theirs. And MasterCard started working with these factory owners under our financial inclusion efforts at MasterCard. And when we moved them to a mobile wallet, brought them into the financial digital economy, those women were saving more money. They had agency over their spend. But then we started thinking about, as well, how does this connect to the climate crisis? In Egypt, there's extreme drought. There is food security issues. So we're also positioning this community to be better able to handle the climate adaptation issues that they're faced with and become more resilient with some of the disruption that's coming their way. Now, we could not have done this alone, right? MasterCard couldn't have made this type of impact without working with Business for Social Responsibility, BSR, without getting the buy-in from the factory owner to start this pilot and to prove that it's out. And now that we've done this, there's this huge opportunity to scale this as a solution. Not only is this a social impact solution to drive financial inclusion, but it's also a solution to drive climate adaptation and prepare communities who absolutely need toolkits to deal with what's already knocking on their door. So again, these types of partnerships, proving out concepts, and then moving towards scale across other countries with other governments, other industries now that we have these tools available, that's how we'll be successful.
This is fantastic. So I'll just echo some of what you said. First, we've made exactly the same experience in Africa with mobile wallets. It started a long time ago, and we find that when it's on a wallet, the money tends to be less drunk or wasted, and everyone's better off. Two, and that's a bit of a digression, but an important one. The more we financially educate women, the better off everybody is. Household management, but also environment and everything else, sustainability. Three, the garment industry is a very important one, also a very tricky one. It was in fact the first industry on SALT, which is a platform for SMEs in India, where we now have hundreds of thousands of SMEs doing commerce on that platform, where we plug other financial and other services. The garment industry is a remarkably difficult one to handle, but also such an important one, and the impact is so great. So if I ask you about your diversity in that supply chain, if I ask you about the impact, the social impact, the environmental impact of that supply chain, absolutely you. And then last but not least, on partnerships, I just wanted to point out that there's virtually nothing we do or want to do alone. Right? Every one of the ventures is in partnership with someone. Be it an operator, an investor, a JD, a client of the bank, somebody who brings something that we don't have because we can't do it all ourselves. So it's a model in itself.
Now, just moving this away from the organizations and the climate, I'm going to move to the societal impact and financial inclusion. As you said, was very core to what you wanted to drive around the emerging market footprint and financial inclusion of small businesses. How's that helping, and is that really core to the strategy again?
So, well, in some respects, I think you heard the answer from my prior two speakers, because yes, any time that we can deliver financial inclusion, we are uplifting a society, particularly when it's focused on women. I mean, the research is there, the science is there, the history is there, you see it. So what do we do as a bank? You know, we provide capital, and we help commerce flow, and we need to do it in the markets that we operate in. So it is a screamingly obvious place for us to be, and an important place for us to be. I think that when we think about the broader concept of inclusion, the other thing I would like to talk about, because you can't really separate the E and the S, I mean, we're hearing this right now, is that we used to think about these things in silos. I'm the S person, I'm the E person. I think we need to debunk that and say we're the everything, because the climate equation disproportionately affects those who are least able to deal with it, so it becomes the S problem. And if you're also attacking S problems, you're actually helping on the climate side. I mean, I had a very provocative session last night on the healthcare topic. So, well, the healthcare topic is losing its attention right now because it's being drowned out by climate. But if we aren't investing in vaccinating people and allowing them to be healthy, they can't be equipped to deal with the climate. So these things are so well intertwined. I think we have to make sure that we are focused on both, and that inclusion piece includes that. Another thing that we're grappling with in our markets is in the transition space. So as we are asking some of our footprint market countries to transition off of high carbon emitting dependencies and invest in greener technologies, one of the things we're very keen on is that's where the jobs are, in those old worlds. And if we aren't then providing the ability for jobs of the future for the people who will lose their livelihoods if we say decommission coal early. What do we do with those people? We've got to upskill them, reskill them. And so that's a different kind of inclusion, but we need to, that inclusion and a just transition is absolutely critical.
David, a question to you around technology enablement. Are there things that we think we're doing really to create real impact on the technology side, and what would some of the examples be that you think stand out in terms of the technology enablement that's been done around the ESG space?
Yeah. Well, I think technology is just a tool. So what's really important is that we develop the technologies that we must develop, that we need to develop, instead of just waiting for the market to kind of get there someday. And this is where I think like policymakers and leaders can be so helpful. Just saying like, we prioritize this problem, show us the solutions. You know, like there has to be more leadership to say like, technology industry, my industry, Tencent's like the biggest technology company in China, whatever, like we want Tencent to build this because we have a wildfire issue, we have a drought issue, we have a food productivity challenge or food security issues or energy issues, whatever. Like, I don't, to be honest, don't really hear it that often around the world. And I'm mostly focused, not, you know, we have our Chinese colleagues, but I'm like looking around the world on a daily basis. And this is really the mindset change that has to happen. There's so many, because like when an entrepreneur brings a technology to the market, say they're based in Silicon Valley, but they have a perfect technology for Africa. This is a really hard discussion to have because they're in Silicon Valley. Someone with needs is in Africa. And how do you actually even talk to them and show them what you have? And then, you know, like it's very challenging in practice. Because I try to spend all my time on this kind of health technologies. I mean, I work with like Health Innovation Exchange, I'm the advisory board there, and like I'm really passionate about this, and it is hard. Like it's not difficult for me, maybe occasionally to talk to a minister or something and say, hey, we have a company in our portfolio. But to actually have that portfolio company providing solutions is a lot of work. It would be much more efficient if that minister or department or whatever says like, we're ready to go, we want the solution. I have people with, you know, a critical challenge here, talk to us, you know, and so it's really challenging. Now, I think artificial intelligence has a lot of leverage in various ways, particularly for driving efficiency in the agricultural space. So actually getting more productivity out of your fields with less water usage, pesticide usage, water treatment, less energy going into it, more water coming out of it. You know, saving, conserving your water, you know, energy, less waste of energy. And that trickles throughout the entire energy system. Everything I've just described can really trickle throughout the system. It's a very powerful tool. However, the world's artificial intelligence experts are scarce. They are working on entertainment applications. I'm sorry, Tencent does that too, you know, but everyone's very excited about ChatGPT. It's amazing. Now the AI can tell stories for us, so we don't have to make our own stories anymore. But like, can we get some of these folks to like really convince world leaders. I would like to do more, help me, everyone, but like, can we apply this to really like a transformation in global agriculture and AI, like hyper efficiency going through the system? So we're not wasting a drop of water, not wasting a drop of pesticide. I'm sorry, pesticides,
Yeah.
for sure, herbicides, fertilizers. It's all about efficiency and optimization. We go from efficiency to optimization. Now we're getting like, we're really saving. Now we're really driving productivity through intelligence. It's just decision making, but you want the decision making to go into the background and kind of let the AI drive it for us, so it's not humans acting like air traffic controllers all day long. Come in, turn this off, turn that on, because that's what the AI does. You want it just in the background working for the price of software, which is often, as we know, free. We just copy it and repeat it in the cloud. So this is like the underappreciated opportunity of our generation, but we have to have passion on earth for efficiency and then optimization to even have the dialogue, because I wrote a book on this a couple years ago. I talk about this wherever I can. I write articles. I'm not very popular on this topic, to be honest. I'm not going to be the one to make it more popular. Maybe everyone has to work together and get excited about it. But to me, this is the big one. Efficiency. We can make progress right now, today, here in Davos. We can make progress, wasting less. Anytime, anywhere.
Excellent. I'm conscious of time, but I do want to give the opportunity to the audience in case there are questions that have come up as you were listening to the speakers. This is your time. Questions? Yes.
I'll ask one first. Just on being so unpopular on waste, mainly to you, but I guess actually it speaks to all of you. I think what's the incentive breakdown? Why do the benefits not move to the people? Why is there a behavioural issue on efficiency? And does that change as we have chief sustainability officers taking a top-down view saying, actually, we've got KPIs? Is there a behavioural aspect there?
I have an opinion.
Sure. So, being a payments industry leader, right, that MasterCard is, the model that we've had is driving and focused on consuming, right? We're all trained to consume. So what happens when we take a more circular, regenerative view of this, which needs to include less waste, more reuse, longer life, all of these things. So back to the big idea of reducing waste, but for us it means leveraging our 90 million merchants. It's huge. 90 million merchants are part of our network. 20,000 banking partners, one of our most important right here, and 3 billion card holders. How many people are on the planet? Well, MasterCard touches 3 billion of those. So we're sitting at the nexus of a huge opportunity to help drive and inform some of those changes. How do we leverage the power of our network? So when I'm sitting inside MasterCard and I look at our net zero commitment, which those 25,000 plus employees are now compensated on, that's good, that's important, but our carbon footprint is very small. So while that's good, that's not fundamentally going to impact society. It's not going to help really drive change and address climate change. What will, though, is MasterCard leveraging the power of that value chain. So that's what we're working on. That's what I'm really excited about, and looking forward to creating more partnerships while I'm here at Davos, and that is why I'm here, looking for partners to help us in this journey.
So first of all, I totally agree. I was talking to someone about one of the European countries, why they're not driving efficiency, and we were agreeing, like, what's going on in this country? It saves the people money. Like, this would be very popular for the politicians to say, we're going to make little investments, do a couple things, we're going to drive the theme, and you're going to save on your very high energy bills. But somehow, so I'm very puzzled. But I think this is an area for Standard Chartered, actually, because I was reflecting on, for example, artificial intelligence solutions that we support in agriculture. And I can just recall the conversation I was having with an entrepreneur in our portfolio. Okay, a company's named Phytech, they're out of Israel, they're amazing. They boost agricultural productivity while reducing water by 30 or 40%. I love this company. Okay, I usually don't mention names of companies, but I did. Anyways, talking to the entrepreneur saying, your entire problem is customer financing, because farmers around the world, whether they're in Silicon Valley or a rather challenged developing country, they're all capital constrained. They do not want to invest in more equipment. They don't want to invest in new pipes or even like just automation stuff that talks to the internet and then decides when the valve turns on and off to flow water, right? According to the health, what Phytech does is they optimize the health of the plant and deliver water to the plant exactly when the plant needs it to always make sure it's as healthy as possible, like a Fitbit kind of situation. And by doing that, they save 30 to 40% of water for that plant. So there's a cool relation between like water and agriculture, and it's all about like being efficient just to get more productivity out of the plant. The productivity grows about 10% when the plant's more healthy in these fields. Okay, what's the big problem? The customers don't have money. So I keep saying, you need a partner, like a financing partner, because each installation is like $1 million or $2 million, you know, something in that range. And can you have that magical partner that goes, you know, understands how your solution helps that field, that agricultural facility, whatever, and says, okay, we get it. We've been doing this for a long time. We know this the solution works, and you know, the payback is like 10 or 20 year, whatever. We saw this successfully around the world with solar. Many people installing solar systems get financing for it. Some people have the cash for the $30,000, $40,000 up front, whatever, but most people are getting financing. This needs to happen for these solutions in the space, and I don't see the entrepreneurs going to the banks, which is why I was having that conversation with the founder. I was like, you gotta go talk to the banks. And I don't know how often the banks go. I'm not trying to be unfair here, but like, how often do you go to the entrepreneurs? And certainly, where are the politicians saying, hey, you know, there's some tax incentives, and you save, you know, you can amortize this if you do an investment in a resilient way. So there's a lot of parts of the ecosystem that just aren't really optimized. Everything's there, all the pieces are there, but and I think this could be.
But that's not good. But I appreciate the challenge, David.
Yeah.
And the good thing is that because we're discussing about alternate business models, I don't want Alex to touch upon that. As to what are we doing in the lab?
You know, thank you, David.
Okay.
So I get asked.
I snuck one of my portfolio companies.
And you know, I get asked all the time. So this agri-tech company you just launched in Kenya, or this aquatech idea you have, or this healthcare-related, you know, healthcare and retirement planning company you're launching in Singapore. What does it have to do with banking, Alex? And what does it even have to do with fintech? Thank you. I don't need to repeat the answer because you just gave it. You know, it's the adjacencies and the ecosystem plays that are important. We're trying to say on the video, which is, you know, these ecosystems of things that connect to each other and reinforce each other are a lot more powerful than the thing itself. So that you just brought it to life.
But also, I think one of the other answers, I think, to your question about how do you incent that behavior change, I do think it is creating inside a company now, if you're talking about intra-company, which is, I think, the nature of your question a little bit, the incentive systems do matter. I mean, you heard it right here from Ellen on MasterCard. The ESG goals or KPIs all the way down through the entire organization, people do respond to what they're told they've got to pay attention to, you know, in your scorecard or in your comp or whatever it is, that's the reality. With the way I start to see this playing out in terms of some of that behavior change on the process improvement bit is things like carbon budgets. This is now a new notion that do you set a carbon budget for a division or down to the employee? Here's what you get for the year. You choose now, do you want to fly or do a Zoom call? Or how are you going to reduce, you know, how are you going to meet that budget? And what is the penalty if you don't? I'm a much bigger fan, by the way, of incentives rather than the stick. But those they can be powerful tools for that behavior change.
And to the stick, I think it's part of the answer, right? And that applies to innovation broadly, you know, a whole bunch of things. If in banking, if I make a big mistake, the punishment is very immediate and very individual, right? It's my neck, literally, in my career. If the punishment is collective, like if I become irrelevant over the course of 10 years because we're not serving customers right, or my carbon footprint is wholly inadequate, it's collective punishment. It's the difference between individual and collective incentives, which I think we'll need to address in the next years.
Yeah, and on your partnership point, you brought up the solar. So if I think about the U.S. context about how the solar industry developed, it was the government that provided tax equity incentives. Yep. And I'll tell you something, that was the game changer for solar. And then as soon as the government did that, what did that allow? Because at that time it was a nascent industry, it was hard to finance because you weren't really sure if it was going to work and what was the commercial return and blah, 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 all that stuff. But the minute they did that, the banks went, whoa, there's my math right there. I can do the math right there, and boom, and all the financing started to flow. A different version of that was early days of wind and solar. You know, I took half these companies public. The only way we could get the commercial finance to flow was when you had a government offtake saying, I will buy that energy supply from you at this price. I can finance that all day long. But this is where the partnership has to work together, I think, if we're now talking about these big technological innovations.
Super. I'm just conscious of time, but we'll take the final two questions, and they can be very quick.
So So I guess my question is more on the investing side, because I think for a lot of investors, the biggest challenge is ultimately the risk-adjusted return. And how do you tackle that in terms of what are the return targets that you seek? And obviously when you're talking about these new emerging technologies, you're also talking about higher loss ratios. So how do you balance the need and the want to incorporate ESG, to want to invest in new technologies, but at the same time meet your own internal hurdle rates that are set by the board and the GM or the shareholders?
I think my question sort of links, if I can just add to it.
Okay, why not? That's good.
I don't know
They
if
can
you
be
hear
answered
me.
in one go.
Please, please.
And how do you balance the fact, so I come from Pakistan, so I don't know, how do you balance the fact that the requirements in a country like in Pakistan are very different to the ESG goals you're setting in Europe and the US, and there's this increasing worry that standardized ESG goals and return goals will basically make the sort of disparity between wealth between these countries just sort of increase. So how do you sort of, as global organizations, try and look into that as well? So when you're looking at returns, would you give leeway to smaller countries or less developed countries, and sort of the thought process behind that?
Well, I could tackle part of that. There's a venture probably question maybe about this risk-adjusted return, and I typically think of venture as portfolio version of that. But if you're talking about more, how do we bank some of these either newer technologies or countries that have a higher risk rating and all of that? So once again, I turn to partnerships. Blended finance is the new term of art for where you bring in partners to enhance the return on something that might have a disproportionate risk to it. So you've got oftentimes multilateral funding banks who have a different return threshold. They used to operate in a silo. It was sort of, if I'm an MDB, I operate here, and the minute it's commercial, I step out and let the banks come in. The new thing is actually we can come together in the same project or the same structure, and the MDB could provide concessionary finance, which unlocks or takes some of that risk off the table to allow the private capital at its normal commercial return threshold to play. And that can be a very powerful tool to create some of those opportunities where otherwise you couldn't generate a commercial return. And in some cases, we're starting to see a little bit of a theory that says almost the investment phase is going to be at a lower threshold. So we actually, within our own bank, we have a pool of capital that is designed to support emergent technologies that we know. It's not so much a technological question, does a technology work or not, it is can it scale. Different risk profile, but we really want to foster that. So there's a pool of capital that we have that we're allowed to lend to those companies at lower thresholds where you've sort of taken the tech risk off the table and you're saying, I just need to get this scaling. It could be EV infrastructure, it could be green hydrogen, whatever the thing, well, green hydrogen is still probably techie questions, but I think you get the point, is that we could go there at a lower return threshold because intuitively we know that is a game changer disruptor for the future, and that's the kind of business we want to be banking for the future. So we're giving ourselves a little bit of that flexibility.
Just add on the return point. So we take VC type risk, we need VC type returns, and so we're actually not compromising on this. And so we think we can achieve this. We think it's not incompatible. Well, we need a little bit of leeway and tolerance from the larger organization. It's not so much the point of returns, but the timing of the realization of returns. The fact that we're investing for a little longer term, and it will, by definition, take some time to crystallize these returns. And we, in the meantime, we may also very well be at odds with other short-term KPIs that the organization has, because we measured quarter after quarter in terms of metrics that the market follows, and we need a bit of that leeway, for which we define some capacity. There's an element of appetite, risk appetite, creating the capacity for that leeway, but not compromising on returns. In fact, every single venture we build will have to be commercially viable, will have to stand on its own, or else it cannot be, or else it becomes perhaps philanthropy or CSR, but it's not venture building, it's not venture work. So not compromising on this. On Pakistan, as you probably know, we've been there for 160 years now,
Yeah.
almost. As an organization, I used to go to Pakistan no less than once a year, pre-COVID, time to get back. I think there's a wonderful opportunity in Pakistan to use different business models, different technology, and start from scratch. Because in some ways, the barriers that I was alluding to, business setups, business models, infrastructure, legacy, and etc., may not exist, and the urgency of the needs is here. You talked about the garment industry, and there's a big one in Pakistan, among other other industries. So the urgency of needs combined with not a whole lot of legacy, create a wonderful opportunity to create business models that are sustainable in the first place. And so, do you need more leeway for this? Maybe. Certainly it's a longer term investment because returns may not be immediate, but it's also where some of the biggest impacts could be realized.
And also where the consumers are. They want the sustainable business, products. So you can demonstrate that.
In this case, it's
And just, I think the question started from Pakistan, but I think it was a more generalized question around market needs or country needs, especially smaller emerging markets being different from these standards being set for.
Sure.
Just touch upon the adaptation report, which is focusing on that.
Sure. I'd love to share with all of you that we just launched a report called the Adaptation Economy, and you can find it on our website, or we can share the link with you. But this is the idea that we must face the reality that we're living with climate change. It doesn't matter if it's a 1.5 degree scenario or whatever we end up with. We need capital to flow as much as we have been to mitigation or reducing carbon emissions. We need the capital flow to help us to adapt to the realities. And we did a study in 10 of our largest markets, India, China, Pakistan, etc., to try to figure out how do you quantify this? Because it's a little bit of an amorphous topic for people to understand. It's like, well, you're investing in something that's going to go down. Why would you do that? Well, we're trying to reframe the narrative to say, if you make the investment in this infrastructure, in resiliency, et cetera, and adaptability, it's disaster avoided by many multiples. The math shows 12 times multiple return, if you will, on that dollar invested. That's a pretty powerful return in VC terms or any other terms.
Okay.
And the longer you wait, the more that gap or that delta grows. And yet today, in those same 10 markets, less than 0.4% of financial flows are going toward the concept of adaptation. Now you could say, well, gee, why would you go throw good money after bad in an island nation that's going to sink anyway? Well, you need to step back and say, what is the impact if we don't do it? Because it'll be migration, it'll be all kinds of suffering, but it'll also be products and services that the world wants to buy that won't be delivered anymore, whether it's agriculture or other. So you're also protecting your own supply chain in some cases. So there's a whole reason why this makes a lot of sense. Resilient homes of the future, that's what the consumers are going to want to buy, because you're going to need a house that can withstand fires and floods and storm and whatever. So I think this is what we're trying to do our part to also get this on the global agenda, get it on the table so people start thinking about it and talking about it, and we create frameworks for it, and then the capital will flow.
Thank you. I'm just conscious that actually I have overrun the time that was allotted to me, but I did want to tell you that I'm not a professional moderator, so I'm allowed to make a mistake also, so please bear with me. And I know all of you need to run to your next meetings, but before that, a big thank you. I'm not going to attempt to summarize what has been really a great, wide discussion. It's going to be very difficult for me to do that, but it does leave us with some thoughts. Right? Thoughts around the fact that how do we differentiate between markets and the global standards, core business strategy, but at the same time developing alternate business models, but how do we innovate and then actually incentivize that innovation? These are some thoughts that we'll absolutely have to tackle with, but thank you so much for your time, and a big thank you to all of you for being so patient and staying here. Thank you.